We've poured a lot of resources into equity work for decades. So why are we still getting the same results for Black, Brown, Indigenous, and linguistically diverse students? Why? Because we've been fighting cognitive redlining with the wrong weapons. Most districts think equity is about better relationships, high quality materials, or even just efforting, putting in more work and trying harder. But Zaretta Hammond, one of the sharpest minds in education, says we've been unwittingly practicing what she calls cognitive redlining. We're hardwired to underdevelop students' cognitive capacity, not through malice, but through compliance driven systems that get kids through lessons without ever building their learning power. Think about this: your personal trainer doesn't do the push ups for you, they coach you, they assess where you're at, they design a program, they help you overcome obstacles. That's what our students need too. Not over scaffolding and not strategy stripping, but actual cognitive apprenticeship. And what's at stake? Every day we confuse getting students through the lesson with building powerful learners. We're maintaining the system we claim to disrupt. We're creating play it safe classrooms in a world that desperately needs ruckus makers. So, what does it actually take to become the personal trainer of students' cognition? How do you help kids turn random information into meaning laden, usable knowledge? Why do so many well intentioned leaders keep falling for seductive shortcuts and dangerous detours? Zaretta Hammond's here to talk about a new book, and she's also going to show us where we're going wrong and, more importantly, how to get it right. Hey, I'm Danny Bauer, and this is Better Leaders, Better Schools, the original ruckus cast for visionary leaders who want to do school different, even within a traditional system, so that we create campus experiences worth showing up for. Thanks to ruckus makers just like you, this show ranks in the top 1% of nearly 4 million worldwide podcasts. So thanks for pressing play. And once again, we'll be back with the main content right after some messages from our show sponsors. For over 30 years, ODP Business Solutions has helped schools transform from whiteboards to smartboards. Why? Because when you get the right tools, everyone wins. Visit odpbusiness.com/education to revolutionize your school's learning spaces. That's odpbusiness.com/education. Staffing stability isn't just about filling positions. It's about what makes educators stay. Frontline Education's 2026 K-12 Lens Report highlights what districts are doing differently to strengthen retention and long-term support. You can download the full report at frontlineeducation.com/leaders. That's frontlineeducation.com/leaders. Over 1 million teachers rely on IXL because it's empowering, it helps them make better decisions with reliable data, and it adapts instruction based on student performance. You can get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. A principal I work with walked into her staff meeting last week with one clear next move on the culture problem she'd been circling for months. She didn't get there alone. She got there with Digital Danny. He's always there, never forgets, and he evolves with you. Get started with Digital Danny at myprincipalcoach.com/ruckus. That's myprincipalcoach.com/ruckus. All right. And Zaretta, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, it's my honor. This is such a privilege for me. Just admire your work, and we're here to talk about a new book, Rebuilding Students' Learning Power, right? Teaching for instructional equity and cognitive justice. So a meaty topic to dig into, and I think why not just like dive right in and say where's schools unintentionally practicing what you call cognitive redlining And, what would it take to dismantle it?
That's a really great question to start with. Number one, I tweaked the question a bit because I don't think teachers or leaders are practicing it. I think it's unwittingly. Like
Mm,
we have across the
mm,
nation invested multi-millions into equity work, particularly since No Child Left Behind. Like this has been decades, right? 3 decades at least. But I think what has happened is in the service of really talking about the relational part, we've missed the ways in which our education systems have been hardwired to underdevelop the cognitive capacity of historically marginalized students, Black, Brown, Indigenous, linguistically diverse students, right? And so I think we have to shift the focus. So, where are districts unwittingly kind of allowing this inequity by design, that shape shift to keep slipping
mm,
past kind of our equity firewalls we're putting? Like people are working hard. I mean, they're bringing this stuff into schools. And at
definitely.
the classroom level, the instructional core is where we don't necessarily see the traction. And so, that to me is the real crux of it. Like, how, with instructional
Mhm.
leadership, do we start to see these things that we are unwittingly, unconsciously feeding? Not because anybody gets up and says, yeah, we want to go and put some cognitive red lines in place. I've never heard anyone say that. But I do see that
Yeah.
we continue to see students not achieving at the level that they should, and then we go towards something like high quality grade level materials, right? High expectations. There are a lot of the jargon and the practices that are designed to be equity focused, but still don't disrupt things at the root.
Hmm. And do you see that campuses and systems, they sort of confuse that idea of equity and maybe unwittingly, again, lowering the bar? And, how do systems course correct
Yeah.
for those type of
I think
actions?
again, this is one of the reactions in terms of course correction in kind of misreading the landscape. So what we see, again, pumping up high quality grade level materials. We should have those, but if your students can't read
Hmm.
or they're not good problem solvers or don't have adequate background knowledge or can get to conceptual understanding, just putting grade level materials doesn't give them the skills to do that. So what I see unwittingly is over scaffolding and, that being promoted in pacing guides. Like, it's really about the content, not about the learner actually becoming more powerful learner. That is number one that I see, right? The turnkey practices. Hey, here's the new hot practice out on the street. And oh, it's aligned with the science of reading or the science of learning. We don't really have to understand how it works. We're just going to turnkey it. Everybody do this strategy. So
Hmm.
then we engage in what I call
Hmm.
strategy stripping. Like it's not about understanding how and why these work, right? This is what Hattie talks about with visible learning. Why are there signature pedagogies? Why are there the big four elements you have to have in place? Because as leaders and educators in the classroom, we have to understand this so that we actually can pivot around the inequity that wants to maintain itself. So those are the ways that I see because they unwittingly look benign, right? They look helpful. Let's get students through the
Hmm.
lesson, but getting students through the lesson doesn't build their learning power. It just gets the lesson. And then
Yeah.
the assessment tells us, oh, we just got them through the lesson, but they don't have a way to build understanding, right? Or problem solving, or they don't have number sense or fluency with, their sound spelling correspondences. So that we know what the learning stuff is, we just don't know how to close the knowing doing gap.
I love language and how people intentionally, use it for having this podcast, right? Ruckus makers in the audience. That was an intentional choice, and it stuck. And you just talked about powerful learners and learning power. You don't always necessarily hear that put together, but I like how you describe that. Can you give the ruckus maker who's watching, engaging with this content, a little bit of idea what you mean by
Yeah,
that.
and it's not one that I've made up. So again, the UK is probably about a dozen years ahead of us, about 12 years ahead of us in using the science of learning. But there have been a handful of folks here in the United States who have been championing the science of learning for a while, right? And part of what they talk about
Mm,
is this idea of students actually improving their ability to process information. Marzano started talking about it in 2004 in building background knowledge. You had David Perkins talking about, right, learning the the whole game of learning, right? And so mastering the whole game of learning. You have people talk about learning muscles. And what's different about that is the idea that we recognize that a key factor in getting student achievement up is helping the student actually be able to process information, take content that is new, might feel random, and turn it into meaning laden, usable knowledge, right? And we know what that process
mm,
is. It's not like, oh, this is new research. This has been around for a long time. And this is how anybody learns outside of school. But what we've done is we the kind of the infrastructure, the mechanism, the factory kind of orientation towards school prevents us from putting
mhm,
students in the driver's seat. And then what we get is this kind of, you know, misinterpretation of it, like this seductive shortcut that, oh, we want students to have agency or to be independent learners. So there's a way in which we just want them to have study skills or to be on task more versus kind of grappling with ideas and building knowledge because that's how it happens. So I do think there
mhm,
is, space for leaders to learn what the science of learning actually is, not kind of boil it down to some brain-based strategy that now every teacher is going to do that. And the teacher's still not talking to the student or looking at the student or coaching the student. In the book, Rebuilding
mm.
Students' Learning Power, I talk about it as teachers need to become the personal trainers of students' cognition, right? Mr. Miyagi and the
Yeah.
original Karate
Okay.
Kid, right? Wax on, wax
Right.
off, right? Teaching skills, teaching moves. And the teacher's not doing the work. The teacher's literally coaching the student. And what does that mean for how a school
Mhm,
building or a
mhm.
school district understands, has shared language and shared understanding of what these practices are?
I like that example, especially Mr. Miyagi or a trainer. Is at the gym. I was at the gym today, and I would love it if my trainer lifted for me, right?
Absolutely,
But that's
absolutely.
they don't do that. They
That
don't do that.
you
But they do.
Yeah, I was just gonna say you come in and, for an assessment because 'cause you're gonna get started working with the trainer and they say, "Well, give me 5 push-ups,"
Yeah,
right? You do 2 and ask
yeah,
for a
yeah.
bucket, and, they don't just like, "Oh, Imma get down there and do the other 3 for you." No, they just like, "You alright? You
Right.
want some water? Okay, back at it." And we don't necessarily create, classrooms where they are that kind of dojo for students. They're not in a
Hmm.
cognitive apprenticeship, and a lot of leaders don't quite understand the science of learning yet to lead, educators in a building toward creating that kind of environment and interaction.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And it's so helpful. They challenge, they encourage, they help me get more efficient, in the lifts and that kind of thing. And so if that's like how they show up, I'm curious too, like how you might think about if we started to measure sort of like success in our students in terms of their learning power versus test scores, those kind of,
Absolutely.
traditional, let's call them outcomes. Like what would ruckus makers stop doing
Mm.
tomorrow if they wanted to make that
Yeah, I
shift?
think if they wanted to make that shift, one of the things they would do, I'll start with what they should do. What they should be doing is checking students for their grasp of core concepts, right? This is what we mean by conceptual
Mhm,
understanding. So in the book, I talk about the grasp score, right? How is the student getting it,
mhm,
right? And that from 0 to 5, there is a way in which you can actually assess the learning, not necessarily the outcome, right? Not necessarily the look of dizziness. So
mhm,
being closer to hearing students talk about their understanding and how they're making the connection. So that's one thing. And then I think again, the thing to stop doing is just kind of the pedagogy of compliance. You're just moving students
Mhm.
through a task, and that the task looks busy, or that we have students in turn and talk type of conversation. So there's nothing wrong with a turn and talk if people are just sharing, but a turn and talk doesn't develop conceptual understanding. And so knowing just kind of like, oh, what should be happening in the classroom. So I think being able to kind of stop with more of the performative types of strategies or actions. We want all teachers to do, give students feedback, but are we making space for having the students use the feedback? Have you taught students how to use feedback? Have they actually looked at their own
Mhm.
learning moves? So now I have this feedback, and now I need to learn to be more meta-strategic, not just metacognitive, right? So there's a
Mhm.
lot more that needs to actually happen, not just, oh, we'll stop doing that. Chapter 5, I talk about some of the things that need to stop happening. Decolonizing the classroom is what I call it.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
yeah, I lay out some of those things, but I think primarily thinking about what they also need to add into it.
Is that partly what's going on there with compliance? I guess, like, in terms of power and, control and, I guess I'm curious, like, why a school might default to that sort of
I think it's the
approach.
DNA. So we can't look past historically how public schools have been structured. So the degree to which we think we've kind of broken that mold, we really haven't, particularly for the lowest performing students.
Mm.
So for whatever reason, we believe that the lower performing the students are, the more they need this control. We need to cajole them, push them, comply them with points or demerits to get through the lesson. We don't ever check for understanding. We don't ever check for their confusions, right? That's how learning actually happens. And so that is just kind of the DNA. And I think some leaders have yet to understand how that shape shifting may look like, hey, we have belonging. We really care about our students. We have project based learning, but students have never learned the craftsmanship of learning, right? Ron Berger of EL Education has talked about this a lot. And again, I think it's a missing ingredient when we're talking about the equity equation, right? It's not just, the curriculum or standards, that you literally have to help students learn how to learn. I think that is
Mhm.
not something most leaders have gotten any kind of training or grounding in, let alone how to lead that, let alone how to make sure teachers have that knowledge.
What's wild is that we're still talking about that because I know when I was in the classroom, we were talking about that exactly. Like, how do we teach how to learn, right? Not just the concepts that we're trying to teach, but yeah, going about. I don't know if you call it executive functions or whatever, but um, again, that trainer sort of mindset to build students up so that they can be independent or work collaboratively, whatever, but do it on their own, not necessarily like needing me there all
That's
the
right.
time.
Well, and to
Um,
be clear, information processing is not the same executive
mhm,
function. So I really break that down
mhm,
in chapter 2 and 3 because this is typically the default we go to, right? And executive function
mhm,
is how to organize your binder, study skills, time management. All of those are very important, but they are not taking information that is new, novel, random, and
processing.
turning it into meaning, making connections with prior knowledge, getting to
Mhm,
understanding. No amount of study skills or having an organized binder is going to help you figure out the conceptual understanding of big ideas as they come into the classroom, as they come into the curriculum.
yeah.
And this is typically what standards are going to focus on, right? Does a student
Mm,
understand? But if there's no just teaching the events doesn't get it. Just being organized doesn't get it. And so I do think that is one
mhm,
of the key things that leaders need to understand the difference between information processing and executive function. Both are necessary, But you cannot have deep learning and accelerated learning without improving information processing.
Is it kind of like, the being able to organize and do it on your own, have that skill set, and the idea of like making it
No,
stick? Does that
really.
sound right?
But that's a good shot
Okay.
because I do think where a lot of leaders
Yeah.
are, right? I want students to be independent, but you first have to remember they have to be cognitively independent. You have to actually have the skills.
Okay.
Me just leaving you alone, telling you to, go ahead and do the task. Students will be dutiful and do the task, but then they still don't
Hmm.
understand. Doing the task doesn't always lead to their understanding, and this is why they need that opportunity to get coaching or to have the right task design so that they are engaging in productive struggle. They're engaging in processing. So I start the book in chapter 2 actually breaking down what the 6 core skills and dispositions are that they need, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of these are invisible. Ultimately, as students master those, they actually become more independent. They don't need the teacher to call the teacher over every 10 minutes because they know how to get themselves out of
Hmm.
confusion. They know how to actually make connections, right? So that it's giving them the cognitive skills that are going to lead to that independent.
Got it. ODP Business Solutions, formerly Office Depot Business Solutions Division, has been a trusted partner for schools for 30 years. At ODP Business Solutions, we're by your side to meet your evolving education needs. Here's the thing about creating remarkable learning spaces: you need a partner who gets it. Someone who understands that transforming education isn't just about swapping whiteboards for smartboards, it's about reimagining what's possible. That's why innovative school leaders trust ODP Business Solutions. We don't just deliver supplies, we help you design dynamic learning environments that make students actually excited to show up. From tech integrations that bring lessons to life to flexible furniture that transforms any space into a collaboration zone, to sustainable solutions that teach by example, we've got everything you need to do school different. And the best part, you can get it all from a single supplier. That helps you simplify ordering and streamline budgeting while staying compliant with easy access to cooperative contracts. However you want to advance, ODP Business Solutions has 30 years of experience helping districts like yours get ahead. Visit odpbusiness.com/education to learn more. That's odpbusiness.com/education. Principals and school leaders know the hardest part isn't the hiring, it's keeping great people from burning out. Frontline Education's 2026 K-12 Lens survey report found that while recruiting and hiring has eased, gaps still remain. Districts that provide structured and sustained professional development are more likely to report better hiring outcomes. In fact, nearly half of districts that use software to automate professional growth report hiring has become easier compared to only 30% of districts who don't. If you're trying to build a campus where people feel supported, connected, and proud to stay, download the full K-12 Lens report and see what's working for districts right now. Go to frontlineeducation.com/leaders. That's frontlineeducation.com/leaders to get the full report. Something that drove me nuts as a ruckus maker was hearing teachers say things like, I taught it, they should have learned it. But really, some teachers just don't know how to teach or reteach for that matter so that all kids get it. That's where IXL comes in. IXL's diagnostic automatically identifies knowledge gaps for teachers and provides them with a personalized growth plan for each individual student. Teachers can step into the classroom every day knowing what their students know and what they don't know. IXL's adaptive platform makes differentiating instruction easy. As students learn, IXL adjusts to the right level of difficulty for each student. Close knowledge gaps and accelerate learning with IXL. Get started today at ixl.com/leaders. That's ixl.com/leaders. I was talking with a principal last month who'd been wrestling with the same staff problem for 6 weeks. Every Monday, it was on her list. Every Friday, it was still there. She kept telling me she needed more information before she could make the call. Here's what she actually needed. She needed someone to ask her, if you already knew the answer, what would the answer be? That question cut 6 weeks of circling down to about 4 minutes. She made the move that afternoon. And that's the conversation Digital Danny is built for. He's your AI coach, trained on a decade of how I actually work with principals. And he's available the second you need him to think through something. You can get started with Digital Danny at myprincipalcoach.com/ruckus. Earlier, you talked about seductive shortcuts, and I know that ruckus makers love to get to action quick, right? Like, tell me how, Zaretta. And one of the challenges with that is like how to do it and do it quickly, which I think would be potentially a problem. And you also talk about dangerous detours. So, can you say a little bit more about
Yeah.
that in
I think
terms of
it's so
change?
important because out of a really good intention, there is a sense of urgency. And that urgency drives
Mhm.
that, well, let's just do some stuff. So we try to turnkey everything. We're going to actually just make it actionable, meaning they're strategy stripping. The teachers don't understand the why behind it. They don't know how to modify it in the moment. And they're just doing the same thing over and over like it's a magic wand. Versus the personal trainer doesn't do that. They assess who's in front of them, what their level of motivation is, what their health background is. They take all this information in and design a program and coach you when get a little off track and like help you overcome whatever the obstacles are. It is an interactive thing. And I do think the kind of seductive shortcuts that's kind of driven by this urgency is really what gets us off track, right? And so being able to really understand how change happens. I really believe instructional leaders have to be kind of masters of and students of how change happens. This is why chapter 4, before I get into kind of the nitty gritty of it all about how change
Mhm.
happens. Because if you don't understand that change takes a dip before it actually starts to level off and then increase, we improve. Our first attempts at anything, I call them the first pancake. And we know how that first pancake goes, right? It's bad. And we don't shut the kitchen down though. We make adjustments. And so I
Mhm.
think in this urgency, leaders are trying to avoid that first pancake. And you can't if real learning is happening. But when you can set up an inquiry approach amongst adult learners, then you go slow to go fast, right? And so that's the key principle,
Yeah.
right? You get small to go big. We want to go big and fast. Like, okay, then you want nothing to happen. And you cannot
Mhm.
deny that, you know, outcome. So that's the seductive shortcut. The dangerous detour is that we're just going to talk about relationships or anti-racism or like we're over here and we're not even talking about instruction. So that's the dangerous
Mhm.
detour that if we all just get along, or it's about belonging, right? Or heaven forbid, we
Mhm.
think it's just about the student not being motivated or needs to get a growth mindset. Like we've heard all this before. Those are
Mhm.
dangerous detours. They just sidetrack us from talking about the instructional core and instruction and building students' learning power.
Yeah, and that piece about change is interesting too. I'd love to hear your thoughts on sort of like the human side of change as well. But that piece, the first pancake, I like that imagery as well. I give that to my dog, but it's okay because then by the time I make a pancake 2 and 3, I've got a better
That's right.
process, and I think it helps just sort of like reframe and districts love to talk about like, hey, let's learn from failure, let's innovate, but they don't really mean it, right? Because when you fail, then you get in trouble. I mean, you get written up and disciplined
I
and
tell
that
you,
kind of thing. But
go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say that to me, that's what the first
That's
pancake is. Like you learned what was working and what didn't work, and that leads to improvement. That's, the point I
I
want to
think
make.
to piggyback on that point is the reason that they abandon it is they try to go big too quickly. So what I
Mm,
always suggest, and it is really hard for leaders, you start with a small band of sparks in your school. And it's like, well, every teacher needs this, or we need, like, you haven't even figured out where the pitfalls are. You haven't done your
mhm,
first pancake. Let your first pancake be small so you can make adjustments, you can build capacity, and then you can bring more in. So think about the rollout being concentric over,
mhm,
18
mhm,
months versus this year, everybody's going to do this strategy and none of it takes hold. And on top of
mm.
that, you got 9 other initiatives that the teachers need to do. Right? And so now we got,
Right.
initiative overload, and teachers are not getting any real training in depth to actually learn how to
Mhm,
correct the, small glitches in that first pancake as they implement something. So I this is the biggest challenge I do see amongst leaders is you get small to go
mm,
big and you go slow to go fast. Many of them just want to go fast and try to do it big. We're going to scale it everywhere all at once. That is a for doing
mhm.
nothing.
For sure. It's counterintuitive, but it works. I mean, even in business, like, I have an idea and you want it to scale and impact a lot of people. And the path forward is for find the first 3 to 5 people, right? That'll dance with you and make it happen. And coaching leaders, right? It's so easy. I think it's sort of natural human psychology to look at, this teacher, they don't get it. How do I
That's right.
convince them? And to your point, right? I think you called it sparks, but I'm like, well, who's already bought in? Start there. It's
And
easy, and then
and
learn.
learn because it's almost like going to Costco, Sam's Club, whatever the big box store is, right? Or you go in to get
Mm,
paper
mm,
towels and you come out with paper towels and a 5-pound bag of Polish sausages. How did that happen? Well, it happened because some marketer in there knows how change happens, how you get people to lean in. So there's the
mm.
lady with the little toothpick, you know, sample. And then
Samples.
all the
Yeah.
people are crowded around and you're like, what's happening over there? So you wander over there and then you say, oh, well, everybody else, like, okay, and now you, oh my God, this is delicious. And she says, right next to this this little, sample stand is a whole, frozen food case full of these Polish sausage. So you just grab it. It's convenient, it's doable, you get quick wins, but you're also able to sample it because that's a small bite, right? Tiny experiments. So we don't use any
Mhm.
of what we know about change. And let's actually talk about the human side of change. For leaders,
Yeah.
there's a great book out. It's an oldie but a goodie by Robin Evans. It's called The Human Side of School Change. And what he talks about is the
Mm,
reason some teachers resist is they might be feeling grief over giving up a way of
mm,
doing things. Even though we know it may not be for the children, it's a habit. It's something how do you help them get through their grief? For others, they think any kind of change is maybe a comment on their capacity. So now you're calling me incompetent or you're micromanaging. Like there are all these, and what he's
yeah.
done is actually said, well, there's 6 typical responses and it's back to the relational piece. If you cannot manage people and read fairly quickly what are they experiencing emotionally, you can't help them move to the other side
Mm,
of that. And just what we do is we go in with just a totally technical approach. And we've known for a long time about adaptive change, that it's both relational and
mm,
technical. But you still have to know about how change happens. That's why I wrote a chapter that's like, we're going to talk about instruction through this book, but let's talk about change and the liminal space, right? There's a liminal space. You aspire to one area to be in one place. You are at this current lower level, and there's a little gulf in between. That's the liminal space. I liken it to a trapeze artist, right? We've all been to the circus, hopefully back in the day, where you've seen the trapeze artist let go of one bar, and for a few seconds they're hanging in air before they grab the other, right? It looks
Right.
Fine,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But that's what a liminal space is. You're not quite who you used to be. You're not quite where you want to be. But if leaders can help people stay in that space because it brings that feelings of uncertainty, right? It feels like there's no footing. And if we do not help them manage that, people will go back to something that even if it wasn't productive, right? And so
Mm,
that is a skill set that leaders have to have in terms of change, right? And we have a tendency not to lean into that kind of adaptive process of understanding the human side of school change.
right. Is that what's going on a little bit too when you're introducing productive struggle to the classroom and things are happening with students and it's getting a little uncomfortable and it's like, okay, I'm gonna jump back in. Uh or just, why do adults like respond the way they do when students are a bit uncomfortable, right? In the
Well, just
classroom.
like leaders have to hold that space where teachers are in uncertainty in that liminal space, teachers haven't learned how to hold that space for students. They're still being driven by urgency. They're still being driven by, ooh, the principal might walk in. Now, the research says teachers spend 95+% of their time by themselves. But teachers will tell you, I can't
Hmm.
do that. Because like, how many times, honestly, has the principal walked through your classroom? Like, really?
Mhm,
So they're
mhm,
saying they don't know how to hold that space for students, so that students who already think me being intellectually vulnerable is confirmation of low intelligence. So this is you have to have a
mm,
counter narrative. So in the book I talk about you have to set up a culture of errors before you want to students to engage in productive struggle. If you haven't set that up, you haven't set them up to say it is okay to make mistakes. Mistakes are data, right? And you
mhm,
teach students how to do that. So now it's okay. Now, the reality is most of us know this in our own lives anyway. Like, oh, I made that new recipe. Didn't taste quite like, oh, here's what I'll do different next time. Like I said, nobody shuts the kitchen down, but we have a tendency to quickly abandon any new practice or configuration of an environment because we have this sense of urgency, not understanding how to get the student to kind of lean in without penalizing them or making them compliant.
I'm happy to look a fool because I know in that sense I'm always learning something,
Absolutely.
right? So, but I don't know if I was pre-made that way or if it's a skill that I learned over the years. I can't
I think it's a
remember.
little combo,
Um,
right? A little nurture, a little nature.
yeah.
I think you have to be able to first have a sense of self. You
Mm,
also have to understand how learning happens, right? Kathleen Cushman in her book Fires in the Mind, where she actually takes 100 students on this practice project, how to get students to lean into their learning. And she starts by asking them, what did you get good at? And how did you get good? Right? And then what
mm,
they slowly unpack is the role errors or mistakes or multiple trials played. How did you feel about that? And what it turns out is if the environment was around some other status point, the student just kind of clammed up. The
mhm,
environment was conducive, skateboarders out there in a group kind of doing their jump and somebody's going to
yeah.
hit their butt. And nobody's laughing at them. It's like, oh man, you stayed up 3 seconds longer than the last. So now
Right.
this is
Right.
how learning happens. But when we get in the classroom, students are discouraged from using those natural ways they learn. So the nurture and the nature part are about, do you actually resist the way
Mhm,
schooling, right? Joel Maddock calls this the grammar of schooling. It is designed to
hmm.
shut you down so you actually become more passive and compliant as you move through higher grades.
Yeah, that's wild. I'm taking guitar lessons. We were talking about improv earlier, but I'm taking guitar lessons again. And I bought, my joke is that I know how to play songs and chords, and I did that, to meet girls, right? Of course, and
Okay.
date, because otherwise, that it
Right.
wasn't going to happen. But I'm taking guitar lessons to learn sort of the classical style, right? which is totally different, than just playing like a chords and that kind of thing. And in the beginning, really, really hurt. It was so painful because talking to my teacher, and he's like, "Well, your brain knows, and you have good taste of what it should sound like, and the body's just not willing yet." Um, but it hasn't taken long, maybe 90 days, a little more than that. And I wouldn't say I'm not like concert ready, and certainly not a pro, but I am way better, right? I can remember at day zero what I was like, and that it's the way I describe it, a middle school concert, where you're
Right.
you're sitting there and you're
Yes,
being nice, and he would say it sounds good. I'd be like, Ben, no, it doesn't sound good.
yes.
This sucks. It's
It's
really
good for
bad.
the middle
But
schooler, right?
yeah, yeah,
Thing I
yeah.
would say
Maybe
to
one day.
that, what's so important is two things are working in your brain. And this is, again, what leaders also have to
Mm,
understand the science of learning. One, our brain has a progress principle, meaning it knows this,
mm,
it does this
mm,
gap analysis. This is how it's supposed to sound. This is how you currently sound. And how do I
mm,
get better is about onboarding to the process. That's the beginning where I'm just learning the cores. I'm allowing my brain to be in some confusion about this, but I'm being metacognitive. Like, oh, okay, I know I need to get my hands. So now you're kind of getting a little muscle memory. Next, you're going to go to actually being metastrategic. To sound better, I'm going to need to
mm,
move this finger and not, and this is where your coach is at position to say, I see you doing that thing because you don't know any better. You're like, I
right.
keep doing it. And he's saying, no, you're really not doing it. So in schools, this is where videotape, I ask my teachers sometimes audio tape, right? You think that's what you're doing, but is that what you're really doing? So you need to be able to
Mm,
get another perspective. And so that process leads from metacognition to metastrategic. Metastrategic is I know how it should sound, so I'm going to make these changes in my hand positioning and I'm going to try this one first. Oh, that didn't do it. Okay, I'll try changing this. So it's the small adjustments. We talk about it as deliberate practice as well. Like I know here are three options of what I could do to maybe
mm,
change this tone. So the progress principle, our brain gets excited, releases dopamine when we get a little better, right? We're not where we used to
mm,
be. We
mm.
got a long way to go, but look at you. You can actually do the middle school. You know, people are going to say it actually sounds like it might be music. And so I think
Yeah,
all
yeah.
of these things are what the science of learning has at its core that I think actually augments instructional leadership. And so instructional
Mm,
leadership is not instructional management. And right now we have a lot of instructional management. Are you doing the thing? We're all going to
mhm,
do it. We got a pacing guide. That's management. That's the personal trainer is not managing you. The personal trainer is trying to give you skills and capacities so that outside of the hour we're together, you will incorporate this into your life. You're going to do your
mm,
cardio. You're going to find opportunities for more walking in zone 2. You're going to do some strength training, right? You're going to do all these things on your own, and they're coaching you to transform, be meta strategic about what needs adjusting. That's what we have to bring to actually outwit the shapeshifter that is inequity by design.
Well, rebuilding students' learning power, Ruckus Maker approves. So we want everybody to pick this up for sure. Get it for your staff, right? That would be a huge win. So much to chew on and process here in the book. Are there any other big ideas before we go that I might have missed in questions that you want to make
I
sure we
think
covered?
the book really covers a lot, and it's not just theory, it's practice. I heard someone who was doing a impromptu review on LinkedIn in their own post, unsolicited, said, "This is a book not just to be read, but to be used." And I wrote it that way. It's pretty dense. It's
Mm,
not a quick read because it is a manual, right? And so being able, here's it, here it is, right? Just it's thick. Right? So
yeah.
that's really what I want folks to do. Go slow, get small, try some tiny experiments with it, not strategy strip, but really think about how you help adult learners manage and navigate change that really is about becoming the personal trainer of students' cognitive development.
Brilliant. Where I'd like to close, you've answered this question before, but I'm sure you'll have a new saying. If you could put one message on all school marquees around the world for a single day, what would your message be today?
Well, my message is only the learner learns, right? And so we remember when we were in schools that it is students who are positioned to be the active actors, and that information is not transformation would be right under it.
Hey, Ruckus Makers, thanks again for pressing play. I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I enjoyed creating it for you. And before you go, if today's episode shifted something in you so that you want to do school different, or maybe you have a new idea about how to reimagine education on your campus, then check out My Principal Coach. It's your AI-powered leadership mentor. It's trained on 10 years of mastermind and private coaching experience that I've had. It's like having a world-class Ruckus Maker mentor in your pocket 24/7. You can start your free 7-day trial at myprincipalcoach.com.